Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture, and today we're going to be talking about the self-titled sophomore album from Astronoid. So as all of you have seen in the past couple of years, most of my discovery and embrace of black metal and other genres of extreme metal has followed what I would describe as the hipster path into the genre. Yeah, I was listening to prog metal and symphonic metal and power metal ahead of time that laid some of the heavier groundwork, but it was the more atmospheric stuff that hooked me eventually, and even then, it was never really pure black metal that truly won me over. Instead, more material in the vein of Panopticon or Saor or Fen that was crossbred with other genres. But hey, that happens. You like what you like. You start building up your lexicon of what you appreciate in the genre. You revisit the classics when you can. You do your best to avoid the more obnoxious or toxic parts of the fandom. And yet, when I was prepping to review Astronoid here and going back to revisit their 2016 breakthrough Air, I had a real sinking feeling. Mostly because this is exactly the sort of accessible crossover project that could have grabbed me 3 years ago, but leaves me a little colder now. The most common comparisons have been Devin Townsend and then atmospheric black metal acts like Death Heaven and Allsay, grabbing up the clean production and vocals of the former and the furious blast beat drumming and tremolo picking at the latter, but there was something that felt oddly anodyne and almost calculated about Air, capturing some of the tones to serve as one of those bridge acts, but little the instrumental dynamics or hooks that made their inspiration so special for me. And while the tones meant that I was inclined to like Air, I certainly explains a lot of the critical acclaim from outside of the black metal scene, it just wasn't a project that really stood out to me or really stepped into the realm of greatness. So, alright, was this just a case of me only gravitating to the heavier, more visceral acts in black metal these days? Or was Astronoid just not one of those acts that could really resonate with me? Was it a problem with me or with the band? Well, for further evidence, I decided to check out their self-titled follow-up this year, which somehow is getting even more critical acclaim, at least from critics. The fans have been a little bit mixed on it, but did it deliver? Well, here's the thing. This is the sort of album where, again, I can completely see why it's getting a lot of praise, and I'll even acknowledge that it is a definite improvement from their debut, but it's the sort of project where I'm not sure the minor fixes have gotten to the roots of the larger issues I have with this group, and thus I'm stuck with an album that I might like a little bit more, but ones that's not really moving me nearly as much as I would want it to. And again, it's a bit of a struggle to pinpoint whether this is an issue with my own personal changing preferences with this kind of extreme metal, or whether or not they're just continuing issues with Astronoid that I have as a whole. And I'm getting the sinking feeling it might be some of both, so when I say it's good but not great, take that as what you will. But let's start off with the instrumentation and the production, where if you want to pinpoint where the most obvious changes have come since Air, it is probably here. The band have said that they were looking to rebalance some of their production tones towards giving the Mew-esque multi-track vocals a little bit more presence, try to lessen the tonal clash that could occasionally emerge on the last project in between some of the more ethereal atmospherics driven more by the guitars and the synth and then a lot of the blast beat drumming. But even the drum patterns differ pretty significantly coming off of Air. The blast beats, they still come in, but the progressions are more complex and are not so quick to rely on just raw density, which could occasionally interfere with some of those melodies going back to Air. And hell, with a thickening of the bass grooves and a few more guitar solos in order to back up some of the more prominent vocals, it is absolutely true that the hooks are at least a little bit better. And even the more deliberate synthetic transitions, like the sizzling pop on Beyond the Scope, they do translate better than I expected. There's a smoothness that allows the translations to work pretty well. All that Astronoid would really need for really sticking the landing would be a sense of dynamics to make the atmosphere or the crescendo stick. And this is where we hit the larger sticking point with this album, and indeed one I have with the band as a whole. Look, if you're gonna build the majority of your progressions out of chugging grooves and the rhythm guitar, them driving melodies in your lead, you need at least a sense of contrast, or at the very least effective transitions between instrumental passages to give those more soaring moments a lot of presence. And yet, more often than not, Astronoid slips into a comfortable cadence that can be certainly agreeable on a tonal production level, but doesn't modulate in the composition the way it really should. It almost makes you wish there'd be a passage that was purely acoustic, or just opted for more of a shimmering tremolo riff, or even a synth solo, if we're only to break the songs up or differentiate them directly. Again, I haven't referenced that many individual songs because there's just not much to tell these apart. Now, that's not saying that there aren't moments that do feel distinctive, because there are. When whenever we get a guitar solo on songs like A New Color or Fault or I Wish I Was There When the Sun Set, they do add some splashy color that I really appreciate. The bass line driving the more reserved Lost, it sounds solid even if I'm not quite convinced that Astronoid can convincingly deliver a darker instrumental palette, which is also an issue on Fault. And even if I'm not really fond of the runny synth passage on I Dream in Lines, and some of the vocal production on Water, the hooks, they do stand out pretty well. Shame I can't say much about the lyrics in the same way, and if I want to highlight a place where I really struggle with Astronoid, again, it was here, mostly because it's the sort of writing that is simplistic in its word choice, but frustratingly abstract in the ideas that they want to convey, not helped by grammar that is structured more to fit the rhyme scheme than any consistent sense. And there is a place where writing like this can really connect, and I would say metal is one of the places where it actually can work. It's impressionistic, trying more to capture an effervescent feeling than a concrete idea, with lyrics that are trying to capture a vaguely hopeful, soaring vibe. Or so you might think. Sure, songs like A New Color and Breathe, they seem to fit the mold, or at least seem a little bit more straightforward there, but then you get tracks like I Dream in Lines, which seem to be an unapologetic breakup song, or the contradictory attempts at reconciliation across Lost and Water that feel oddly toxic, or the seemingly self-flagellation of Beyond the Scope, or how much Ideal World almost seems like a sick joke at the expense of itself. It almost gives you the impression that Astronoid is taking the piss out of their own soaring vibes. But then, when you have all the vocals that seem to be trying to sell all this with complete sincerity, and not really a lot of vocal dimensionality either, it leaves you questioning how much this album might just be trying for a Zen nihilism that certainly has got an appeal, but doesn't seem to want to demand a lot of thought or deeper consideration. Or maybe it's approaching all these darker ideas and moments with a sort of devil-may-care attitude and pure sincerity with an ignorance is bliss attitude? I guess there's room for that. The frontman has admitted that was a lyrical theme underscoring a lot of air, and I can definitely hear it there. And hell, one of my favorite songs last year, Fool's Paradise by Poets of the Fall, was all about a similar heady rush for all the wrong reasons, so yeah, I definitely see the appeal. I see why it could work here. But I don't know. I'm not sure the writing quite coalesces to fully drive it home, really make it stick. And honestly, that might just sum up my feelings on Astronoid as a whole. It certainly fills a niche in this sound. It is a bridge act. I do think it's got a little bit more dimensionality in the writing than some people might have given it credit, but those moments often only serve to subvert some of its own strengths, which can lead to a bit of a weird listen. And that's not even getting into the continued lack of dynamics that make some of those strengths so much more vulnerable and weak, at least to me. But still, on a tonal level, I can certainly see the appeal, and I did like this more than Air. It goes down a little bit easier, it's a bit catchier, even if on some level it's still playing in a lot of the same territory that Air did, just with a corrected palette, and one that's a little bit more agreeable for me. And even with that, there was never quite a moment I actively disliked or any real gaping flaws. There is a consistency in the sound that nudges us up to an extremely strong 6 out of 10. I think it would have been higher, but it just didn't quite have some of those standout moments. It's a good album, but not great. But again, if you're looking for one of those albums that is a serviceable gateway into this particular brand of extreme metal, I think Astronoid could fit the bill. So if you're curious, it's good. Give it a listen. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. I'd like to like and subscribe. I'd be more than grateful. It's kind of funny because I recommended this to Crash Thompson, the rock critic, under the impression that I would really like this more than I did, and he loved the album. I'm just a little bit surprised that it didn't go down better upon repeated listens, and I gave this a lot of listens. But hey, if you want to buy or stream it, links down there below, and I got the poll up there. I'm curious where the Astronoid fans fall on this, especially coming after Air. As I said, the critics have been really high on it, but it's had a bit of a mixed reception from fans, so we'll see where that goes. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And hey, if you guys want to support the channel, link to my Patreon right over there. And I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to ultimately use it for in the future. I got some fun ideas, so we'll see what happens there. But till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.